From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Venezuela's foreign minister has given further details of the U.S.-backed plot to assassinate President Nicolas Maduro. Jorge Arreaza met with members of the diplomatic corps in Caracas to present the details of the conspiracy revealed by President Maduro on Wednesday. He said the Colombian government needed to explain why hundreds of paramilitaries are being trained in Colombia to overthrow the Venezuelan government. Our correspondent in Caracas, Madeleine Garcia, brings us more.
The foreign minister, Jorge Arreaza, is speaking to diplomats about the comments made by President Maduro on Wednesday about foreign attempts to destabilize his government. In a communique, the foreign ministry provided more details of the alleged plots by Washington with the support of Colombia and Brazil against Venezuela. Foreign dignitaries are attending the meeting with the foreign minister, where he is going into further detail about the investigations made by Venezuela's intelligence services. Colombian President Iván Duque has already spoken out against the comments made by President Maduro, saying he has never considered attacking any country in the region, but evidence shown by the Venezuelan government paints somewhat of a different picture. Let's not forget that those involved in the assassination attempt against President Maduro back in August were reportedly trained in northern Colombia. According to this latest investigation, over 700 mercenaries are being trained in the same area. We are also expecting the Minister of Communications, Jorge Rodriguez, to speak as well to further explain the discoveries made by Venezuela's intelligence services.
Madeleine Garcia from Caracas. On Wednesday, President Maduro accused the United States of directing a new plot against him. Maduro said that U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton was in charge of the plan to assassinate him and lead a coup against his government. He said Venezuela has evidence that the Colombian government is facilitating the training of Colombian and Venezuelan paramilitaries in the Department of North Santander.
So this plan of John Bolton's has another operational center,
en el Melgar, Colombia.
The Tolmeda Air Base in Colombia.
For his part, Colombian President Iván Duque denied President Maduro's claims.
Colombia is under no circumstances planning nor thinking about any hostile action against any country in the region. We won't allow such doubts or accusations to be made. Those accusations must be rejected by all Colombians. And what should be made clear is that those who are exercising dictatorship against their citizens, generating significant migration flows, must respond to international justice.
The youth wing of Venezuela's Socialist Party has shown its solidarity with the former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass. Glass recently suspended a hunger strike he had been on for over 50 days from prison to demand that his rights be respected.
Call for justice and respect for the human rights of Jorge Glass. They were a clear sign that Venezuela and Ecuador stand united in the same cause.
President Lenin Moreno not only betrayed Jorge Glass, but he also betrayed former President Rafael Correa and the people of Ecuador. He betrayed Latin Americans who believe in unity and justice, who believe in dignity and respect.
The event was a tribute to the bravery of Ecuador's former vice president, who was sentenced to 6 years in prison back in January. For these Venezuelan organizations, his arrest amounts to political persecution. They demand his release.
Lawfare is taking over Ecuador, and it's become quite notorious. Unfortunately, different bodies of the United Nations have turned a blind eye. No international organization has done anything.
Together, they raised their voice in support of the region's progressive governments, under attack from abroad and at home. For these activists, the government of Lenin Moreno has completely changed the policies that got it elected in the first place and is now attached to neoliberal interests.
Lawmakers in Colombia's Congress managed to block a reform that would have allowed the government to arrest former FARC combatants. The right-wing party Centro Democrático proposed this law on the grounds of alleged security and public interest. The FARC party and other supporters of the peace agreement rejected it. The UN has repeatedly called for legal guarantees to protect the lives of the FARC members and respect the peace deal.
We did not expect them to try to put these new articles there at such a late hour at night, through the back door. That basically takes away the power of the special jurisdiction for peace and what was agreed upon to overcome the armed conflict.
A gunman in Palestine has killed 2 people and injured 2 others in the occupied West Bank. The shooting took place near the legal Israeli settlement of Ofra in the central West Bank. According to Israeli forces, the gunman was shot by an armed passerby. The attack happened a few hours after Israeli security forces killed 3 Palestinians in overnight raids. Meanwhile, there are reports that the Israeli military has surrounded the city of Ramallah and closed all entry and exit points. Meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinians in Gaza have marched in solidarity with the victims of raids by Israeli soldiers. The demonstrators chanted pro-Palestine slogans and vowed to continue the fight to end the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Earlier, we spoke with independent journalist Stefan Barbour from Ramallah about the situation in the occupied West Bank.
I'm in the center of Ramallah right now, and all the businesses are closed. There's been settler attacks on taxi services, and they're supposed to come in for a home demolition into a refugee camp right now, Al-Amari refugee camp today. The whole West Bank is on siege, especially the northern part of the West Bank.
More stories coming up. We'll be back.
Sorpresa de todas las sorpresas. La piedra angular de la historia norteamericana no está, como podríamos sospechar, en Washington cruzando el Delaware, en Pocahontas y los colonos intercambiando comida, en Lincoln, en Gettysburg. No, la piedra angular está exactamente en el Álamo. Paradoja, no es la historia de una victoria, es la historia de una derrota y una masacre, es la historia tejana y no norteamericana.
Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In Argentina, the mothers of Plaza de Mayo are organizing their 30th March of Resistance, which will start on Thursday and last until Friday. The march has been led by Ebe de Bonafini since the 1980s to demand respect for human rights. Students and other social organizations will join the march. They will also organize a public, political and ethical trial by the people against judges in the country. They demand the end of lawfare, especially against leaders such as former President Cristina Fernández. Court workers in Argentina are holding a 48-hour strike to demand that the government honor a previously agreed wage increase. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sarina Roth, has more.
A 48-hour strike started on Thursday by the Union of Workers in the Justice System. They're demanding payment of the last part of their wage increase that was previously agreed by the Supreme Court. This included 10% paid in April, 10% in August, and another 10% in October. Now they want to be paid that final 10%. This increase is meant to help them keep up with the country's inflation, which is expected to reach 45% by the end of the year. They also want guarantees for the independence of the judiciary. They say that extra powers charters have been handed over to the government of Buenos Aires, and this will lead to an increase in interference by the executive power in judicial matters. Finally, they are condemning the imposition of new taxes on court workers, which they say is a form of interference in judicial work.
Sabrina Roth from Argentina. Authorities in Bolivia have rejected the violence created by opposition parties against President Evo Morales and how the protests have been shown in media.
In the city of Santa Cruz, a student protest led to the attack of 3 state institutions. The most severe damages happened in the electoral court, where a fire was started. The country's opposition assures that these acts are started by government-backed intruders.
These actions seek to generate violence, and they come from the government, which plans to discredit these marches, which have always been peaceful.
Government Minister Carlos Romero has rejected these accusations and has called them an example of the opposition-led manipulation in social media and in the press. He cited the use of a picture of one of the violent protesters who, allegedly, had a Che Guevara tattoo on his shoulder.
They are using a citizen with an alleged tattoo of Che Guevara. Look, this is not Che Guevara. This is for sure Charles Manson. They have obviously modified the image with some retouching for social media.
The government minister blamed the violence of fascist groups that hire young felons to act with a covered face, calling this practice a cowardly act from the political opposition.
These are the same violent people. They are radical fascist groups, separatists, racists. These are people that make it difficult to live in Bolivia. They don't want to share their collective life with people of color or people with an indigenous last name.
The violent acts in Santa Cruz were rejected by institutions like the Ombudsman's Office, lawmakers, and social organizations that back the government.
We are in a state of emergency headed by the Bolivian working class. The rest of participating organizations are also in a state of emergency.
The opposition is now mobilizing against the candidature of President Evo Morales for next year's general elections. This, despite the fact that it was the Constitutional Court that allowed him to run over a year ago.
For 3 decades, Brazil has been monitoring deforestation in the Amazon through a satellite developed jointly with China. Now Brazil is working on a homemade satellite which will be launched soon. The satellite has helped authorities in discovering illegal activities in the jungle, as well as to monitor deforestation and land use. But scientists are now worried about the policies of the elected President Jair Bolsonaro, who has threatened to reduce environmental controls.
There's a satellite that is part of the Brazil-China cooperation strategy. It weighs 2 tons and will observe Earth, measure vegetation, and things like that. There's another satellite which is developed completely nationally, a smaller one, weighing 700 kilograms. Its purpose is to monitor the Amazon. It will do other things too, but its name is Amazonia 1, and its main goal is watching the forest.
It's the only project in the whole world that does monitoring at this scale. We have 30 years of experience. It's a unique project in terms of forest oversight.
The Commission for Human Rights in the Brazilian Senate is concerned about the future of the country once Bolsonaro takes office. Let's find out more.
The Brazilian Senate's Human Rights Commission condemned arbitrary violations during the trial of former President Lula da Silva.
The imprisonment of Lula is a violation of human rights. He's a political prisoner because he's a former president of a country, and there was very little evidence. He was jailed in order to be kept away from the elections in Brazil, because he was in first place in all the polls. He could have even won in the first round of voting. It is an attack on Brazilian democracy and a serious violation of human rights.
Some of the worst violations have been defamation, improper exposure, the absence of evidence, and the lack of guarantees for a legal process. People did not just lose a president. They lost someone who pulled thousands of people out of extreme poverty.
According to experts, the decision to award Judge Sergio Moro, who helped jail Lula, the Ministry of Justice position in the next government demonstrates his imprisonment was in the political interest of the elite and is persecution of the left wing.
With Lula in this situation, with who he is and how important he is for Brazil, imagine what it will be like for us and the violence that we can expect from January onwards.
There are brutal violations denounced in Brazil and in the whole world, to the point that they were even denounced in the United Nations. Brazil's own government dismissed the direction of the UN with respect to Lula's candidacy. It was an arbitrary way to act, unjust, and political persecution of President Lula.
The Human Rights Commission also fears for the rights of workers once Bolsonaro takes office. The empowerment of the armed forces and harassment of the opposition is making people nervous.
In other news, the President of Mexico has announced an aid plan for Central American countries worth more than $5 billion. Andrés Manuel López Obrador said he spoke to President Donald Trump on Wednesday about a development plan to address the migration issue in the region. He said he wants both the United States and Canada to be involved. Mexico's $5 billion contribution is already included in the budget that will be presented on Saturday. A group of migrants decided to jump over the border fence in Tijuana on Wednesday, only to be detained by U.S. authorities. Frustrated migrants staying in shelters are taking the risk of jumping over the fence in the hope that their asylum claims can be processed quicker. Mexican officials confirmed that as many as 1,000 migrants have jumped over, despite knowing they will be stopped.
How can I explain to him that we're not terrorists? Don't accuse us of things which we're not. We're workers. We're looking for employment. I call on United States President Donald Trump to investigate us. We have not all committed criminal acts in our countries. We're honest, humble people who want a better life.
Still in Mexico, millions of worshippers have visited the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. The annual pilgrimage marks the anniversary of the day in 1531, when the Virgin Mary is said to have appeared to an indigenous man asking him to build a church in her honor. The event is considered to be significant in converting indigenous Mexicans to Catholicism.
People's faith in the Virgin of Guadalupe is felt even more strongly on December the 12th. It's the anniversary of the Virgin's appearance to an indigenous man, Juan Diego, 487 years ago.
I love this date because it showcases people's devotion. Faith mobilizes millions.
About 10 million pilgrims have visited this temple in the north of Mexico City. Arturo Macias is one of them. He came from Puebla to fulfill a promise he made to his best friend on his deathbed.
I have been walking for 3 days. The sacrifice has been worth it. I have a lot of faith in the Virgin.
They come from all over Mexico and even from abroad. Most come to give thanks for their good fortune. Evaristo is grateful for being allowed to come back safely to his homeland.
She has done many miracles for me. I was living in the US and I had some issues. Many of my friends could not return, or they had come back dead. They were killed over there, but I survived.
Mothers ask for their children's well-being. They also pray for the country's situation to improve, especially now that there's a new president.
Let's see if he fulfills his promises. He needs to help us. We are all in need and we believe in him.
There are many who are pleading for peace to come to Mexico, where violence has seen over 120,000 people murdered in the last 6 years.
Be certain that I have prayed for an end to violence.
With dancing, floral offerings and music, believers pay homage to the so-called Queen of America.
Now to the Caribbean. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has made history. It's the first member of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States to decriminalize marijuana for medicinal and scientific purposes. Parliament has approved 2 pieces of legislation that allows for production of the crop. The Caribbean island is now positioned to become a leading medicinal cannabis hub in terms of research and production. According to authorities, the country's growing conditions are well suited to producing the highest quality grade medicinal cannabis available on the global market.
We are also making provision for an amnesty to be given for traditional cultivators who want to come into the mainstream of the medical cannabis industry. And this medical cannabis industry is fashioned largely as an export industry. Of course, we will have people in St. Vincent and Grenadines who will be prescribed cannabis for a medical condition. And also we will have tourists coming here for health and wellness purposes, where cannabis may be prescribed for medicinal purposes.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur.
And we're back. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced that 2 people have been arrested as part of the investigation into a deadly train accident. He said an investigation has been launched by the state prosecutor's office, and all those found responsible will be held accountable. 9 people died and 86 sustained injuries when a train with over 200 people on board crashed into a station platform and an overpass after colliding with another locomotive.
Judicial and administrative investigations have been launched regarding the crash. The state prosecutor's office has so far detained 3 people. This crash will be investigated thoroughly. Those responsible will be brought to light, and whatever is necessary will be done.
After surviving a crucial vote of no confidence, the British Prime Minister Theresa May is once again trying to get help from the European Union on the Brexit agreement. May is in Belgium for an EU Council summit. She is seeking some sort of guarantee that a key part of the agreement on the Irish border will not become permanent. She was set to meet with the European Council President and the Irish Prime Minister for last-minute talks, although both have said that a renegotiation of the deal is not possible.
My focus now is on ensuring that I can get those assurances that we need to get this deal over the line, because I genuinely believe it's in the best interests of both sides, the UK and the EU, to get the deal over the line, to agree a deal. But I recognise the strength of concern in the House of Commons, and that's what I will be putting to colleagues today. I don't expect an immediate breakthrough, but what I do hope is that we can start to work as quickly as possible on the assurances that are necessary.
The Saudi-backed Yemen government and Houthi fighters have agreed to a ceasefire to end hostilities in the port city of Hodeidah. According to the United Nations Secretary General, the 2 parties agreed to withdraw from the city and allow the deployment of a neutral force to supervise the opening of humanitarian corridors. The two parties have been meeting in Sweden for negotiations to end the 4-year war.
You have reached an agreement on Odeida port and city, which will see a mutual redeployment of forces from the port and the city and the establishment of a governorate-wide ceasefire. The UN will play a leading role in the port, and this will facilitate humanitarian access and the flow of goods to the civilian population, and it will improve the living conditions for millions of Yemenis.
Let's now take a look at other stories making headlines around the world.
A fire has broken out at the building of the Electoral Commission in the Democratic Republic of Congo just 10 days before a crucial presidential election. According to witnesses, the fire broke out at around 2 a.m. Thursday. The cause of the fire has not yet been established.
That's when we called the relevant authorities who came to ask about the situation. So far, we don't really know the real cause of this fire.
A car bomb detonated in the city of Al-Bab in Syria has killed at least 2 people and left scores of others nursing serious injuries. The explosion happened outside a mosque in a city that has been under the control of the Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army since 2017. No one has claimed responsibility so far. French Health Minister Agnès Buzyn visited the hospital where the victims of Tuesday's terrorist attack are being treated. The attack in the heart of the city of Strasbourg, as the annual Christmas market was closing on Tuesday night, left at least 3 people dead and 13 injured. Police have since launched a massive manhunt for the suspect identified as Sheriff Shekat. His mother and father, as well as 2 brothers, were detained on Wednesday for questioning.
Unfortunately, we can report 2 deaths out of the 16 people who were involved and injured in this attack. 16 people were injured, 2 died. There are now 3 people who are in life-threatening condition, whose lives are at stake. We will see in the coming hours and days if they can get out of this situation, but it is not certain.
With only 1 week to go before Madagascar's second round of presidential elections, candidates are engaging in last-minute outreach activities to try to win over undecided voters. The second round of elections will pit 2 former presidents, Marc Ravalomanana and Andry Rajoelina, against each other.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but this and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, we are on StarSat channel 461 in South Africa and channel 539 in Nigeria. And we're on social media as well. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.